Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Distil-Nation NZ podcast. This is the podcast all about New Zealand spirits, for you, the consumer, to learn whatever we can try and help you with, right?
It's exciting. It's just, it's an exciting world. There is so much going on. There are so many great people, and it's like, how else do you keep track of all of the new releases, new distilleries, everything else that's going on? Distil-Nation NZ, it's your one-stop shop.
Yeah, my name's Tom. I run Herrick Creek Distillery, a small distillery here in New Zealand, as well as the Juniper Collective, where we are today, if you can see this on video. And who are you?
My name is Cameron. I was running an event recently, and I told everybody that I've been hosting whiskey tastings for over 5 years, which just that really hit it home. I have also been described by others as a New Zealand whiskey historian. So you know what? I'm gonna add that one to the business card there.
Hey, that's a pretty cool one.
I think it's a great title. And I didn't even. That was
But
others.
you know what? I'm gonna hold you back on that until I see the book.
I have the degree, okay?
So do I, but I think a book would make it official.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what are we're talking today about something. People have asked us to talk about this, something very serious for distillers, and it's something that might help consumers understand the landscape of New Zealand spirits a bit, and that is taxation, specifically the alcohol excise tax.
What hurts is that when you hold up a bottle of whiskey and tell the consumer that sometimes half the cost of what they are paying is going straight to the government.
Yeah.
As a mixture of excise plus GST, up to sometimes half of the cost of that bottle.
It's
tax.
Yeah, I like a bottle of my own moonshine that we sell. It's about $35 between excise and GST, just straight to the government. That's half the cost of the bottle. Basically right there. Yeah.
Which leaves many people questioning why, and I hope we can get into, why it does cost as much, but also I guess we have to do a bit of a disclaimer here. You do have a role in the DSA.
Yeah.
And the conversation that we're going to have, maybe you'll need to be clear about where you have your DSA hat on, where you've got your distiller's hat on, and where you just have, I'm Tom and I'm a private citizen and these are my opinions.
Yes, fair
hat
enough.
On.
Yeah. The DSA, if anybody's not sure, is Distilled Spirits Aotearoa. It's a group of New Zealand distilleries that we come together just to promote the New Zealand spirits industry with lobbying efforts and education, resourcing. And we are working for sure to come up with solutions for excise tax on local distilleries. How can we alleviate that pain? It's obviously the biggest financial pain that small distilleries feel. It's a large amount of money that goes away every month, and we pay that monthly. My role in the DSA is, yes, I was on the board. I have actually resigned from the board recently,
right.
Just for family, but. There's some stuff I can't say that they're working on. I can't tell you exactly, but for sure, the fact is when you go into the bottle store, when you look at the shelf and you're looking at Jack Daniel's versus Cardrona, for example, let's just use them, there's a big price difference, right?
Yes.
And most people will look at that and say, well, why is New Zealand whiskey so much more expensive? And look, Jack Daniel's is still paying the same excise that we are, but they're also putting it in the bottle at 38.4% or something, even 37%, I think sometimes. And so you pay a lower percent of the tax based on how much alcohol is in the bottle, if that's the right way to describe it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we are comparing apples and apples.
Yeah.
If you've got 2 bottles of gin, even if we were to take, if we've got this example here, 2 bottles of gin from the same distillery.
Yeah.
One's bottled at 37, and then the other bottle of gin is a Navy strength, say 57.
Yep.
are you saying that these two bottles it's a different tax rate, or they're taxed differently, or it's just an increase of the same tax?
So same tax, right? It would be about $67.50 per liter of pure alcohol. So the bottle of 40% is going to be a cheaper excise bill, just based that there's less alcohol in the bottle, and the 57% will be more expensive for the distillery, but it's still the same $67.5 per liter of pure alcohol. And that's a bit confusing for people as well, because like we're talking like if you take it's a weird calculation, right? You take like if you've got a 40% gin in a 700 ml bottle, you're going 0.4 times 0.7. That's going to give you exactly how much alcohol is in that bottle, like pure alcohol, right? So that's what you're basing that $67.50 on. And that's a weird calculation to get your head around and stuff like that. So it's not like if you have a liter of 40%, you're paying $67.50. Right?
No, because there's water in it.
Yeah, so you're paying the 40% is the only 100% alcohol. That's a very confusing way to put it, but the fact is we are taxed the second highest in the world here in New Zealand, and Australia is number one.
I was about to ask, how do we stack up? And in Australia, per litre of pure alcohol, somewhere around the $100.
It's over $100, a litre.
Wow.
Yeah. And the only thing is, over in Australia, they do have a excise rebate for local distillers. So if it's manufactured alcohol in Australia, they have up to, I think it's just changed up to $400,000 per year they can actually claim back on that excise. So their first $400,000 of excise is free in Australia if you produce it in Australia.
Okay, are we jumping around a wee bit here? So do we?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so do we first look at... So I guess that means that if we're looking at production, if those rates of excise, they're paying less in America to produce...
Yeah, absolutely. Like America's even a more confusing example because
state by state, right?
No, I think it's still federal. But the problem was a couple of years ago they actually came out with an excise reduction for lower production distilleries, and that was sort of a temporary measure. I think even through COVID, something like that. And I believe it's now become permanent. For under a certain production, you pay a lower rate of excise compared to larger size distilleries. But even for like Jack Daniel's, who's producing how many barrels a day, they are not taxed near as much as we are. I think it's in the dollars instead of the like I'm talking like $2 or $3 a liter compared to what we're paying still.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure on that, sorry, but the fact is over there they're taxed differently based on production size, and that's something the smaller distilleries were working on for sure. Coming together, I think there's a couple different craft distillery organizations in the States that work on this sort of thing. And every country is going to be different, right? Every country is going to have their own lobbying efforts, their own government, and their own taxing. And Europe, I don't even want to touch that one with a poll. That'll be all over the place too. Canada is taxed quite high as well. I think it's third or fourth in the world for taxation. So it's a big part of what you pay for your alcohol is just this thing. It's an arbitrary tax called excise, right? And it's actually a big part of American history in the whiskey tax. If you go way back,
Oh yes. See now, that's the part of the Hamilton musical, Alexander Hamilton. They left that part out of the musical where he goes to a very, very old President Washington and says, I need you to ride into battle again because the enemy is the American people and we need to raise a standing US army to go out and basically do battle against these farmers who are refusing to pay the whiskey tax. And then Hamilton gathered up a whole bunch of these farmers who were refusing to pay the tax and brought them to DC basically to stand trial. And then through a whole bunch, basically after doing all of this, Washington started to say, we're being really harsh on our own people here. And so a lot of these people were just held for a long period of time and then eventually were kind of turfed out. The cases were turfed out. And then these people who are now in DC looking, okay, well, how do I get back to my farm? and you've held me here, and what's going on? And they were told, all right, well, on your way, see you later. How do I get back? How do you know? Yeah. Lin-Manuel Miranda did not write a song about that part.
No, exactly. But this is really where a lot of it starts, right? Like, this is, why is whiskey taxed compared to other things? It's an arbitrary tax, really. It's some people will say it's a righteous tax. It's to prevent people from drinking too much. If you increase the price, like on tobacco, we've done that here. Doesn't always work, really. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, as we've seen in New Zealand, and we've covered in a few, certainly if you look to New Zealand and you look to Scotland, again, the grain tax that was levied in Scotland in late 1700s, that again was a punitive measure, and it was part of the wave of taxes that was brought in post-Battle of Culloden, really to try and keep the Scottish people under control and to curb any future Jacobite rebellions. But there were people over here that they saw whiskey production, actually, it's a natural part of the farming lifestyle. These are the grains that are left over. They're not going to, how do I convert it into something that I can use to pay my rent, trade with my neighbours, do all of these kinds of things? I'm going to convert it. So it was, Hank, why are you taxing this? This is just a natural part of the whole farming lifestyle.
Yeah.
Similar attitudes that when people immigrated to New Zealand, and that, as we've discussed already in previous attitudes, there were lots of cases that were brought to court where the prosecutor thought, I've got a slam dunk here, I've got them dead to rights, I've got all of the evidence, everything's in my favour, and these people will walk because the whole, victimless crime, who is it really harming? There's a very much kind of a, no, this is our God-given right to make whiskey. So there's a whole lot of those attitudes. But yes, something that you touched on there, and I remember this being brought in. New Zealand's certainly not unique in this respect. But we're going to raise excise tax. We're going to raise the tax just to stop alcohol being so cheap.
Yeah.
And I guess what we're talking about here, it's very, very different to people that are looking at a craft gin, a locally produced single malt whiskey. This is really this is bottom of the barrel, cheap stuff. This is, okay, we need to make this a bit more expensive just so it's less accessible. And that's one, and this is something that we come back to a lot. This is going to help reduce alcohol harm.
Yes, yeah, and that does come up quite a bit. It just seems like, tax it, increase prices, that'll reduce the people buying it. I don't think it works that way, and I think it's been proven time and time again, these measures don't work just that way. If you want to reduce alcohol harm, it's a matter of education and social services and whatnot, instead of just making it more expensive. But the fact is, if you took a bottle of Cardrona, it's $250, $300, and you took the tax off of that, it's still going to be it's only $50 cheaper. You're talking now $200 to $250. Your average person who's an addict, per se, an alcoholic, is still not going to buy that.
No.
They're still going to go buy the cheapest thing they can find in the store. So it's not really an argument in that case. That's not going to reduce alcohol harm by having that price higher. But so it is a really big discussion, and a lot of people don't know what to do about it. How can we as an industry in New Zealand maybe push through this and grow the industry? Because a lot of distillers are struggling right now, and I would say if we could reduce that excise bill, most alcohol might not go down really by much, really anyway, because most of us would probably end up hiring staff, putting that money back into the community in different ways, hiring people and buying more stocks from locals and doing more projects and stuff like this. So the money's going to get flowed through a different way, because where does the money for excise go? that's the next, you know.
That, yes. So I think 2 or 3 years ago, when excise was going up, was it 9%?
Yeah.
And at that point, I wrote letters to the then finance minister and customs and revenue minister, and just saying that this is prohibitive, and where it will do the most harm is for those small businesses, for our growing spirits industry, looking to the wine industry that New Zealand probably loves to push a wee bit more, but also looking to all of these restaurants that are still kind of trying to recover from post-COVID, going from COVID into this more struggling economy. So these are all businesses that are trying to recover. And a 9%, I think it was 9%, and then it was still going to be like 7
or something like that. Yeah,
the year after.
Yeah.
And the letter that I got back, which was very generic, but it basically said, well, we need to increase the revenue because it is going back into alcohol harm, alcohol prevention. Is that the case?
And it's not. Yeah, it's not at all the case. So on top of an excise bill that we receive every month from customs, we also get a tiny little fee at the bottom called the HPA levy, which is the Health Promotion Agency levy. So if I pay, let's just take a random number, if I pay a $7,000 excise bill because I'm quite small, I'm only paying about $2 or $3 for my HPA levy. So $1,000 is just going into the general government bank account. It's not going towards anything specific. It just goes into the general everyday bank account for the New Zealand government. Only that $2 or $3 goes into the Health Promotion Agency's bank account for alcohol prevention education. And therein lies some of the problem,
Surely this can't be the first time that I didn't get a straight answer from a politician. I don't understand.
It's and I've probably written about 14, 15 letters to all the as many ministers as I could think of, including the Prime Minister, and I've had my local MPs come out, and I've talked to MPs at shows and all this stuff, and I mean, most of them are in favor of some sort of reform. It's just a matter of they haven't seen the right proposal, maybe, or they're not educated enough on even what the excise tax does. And this is quite interesting because one of the MPs that I talked to, who was previously a GP in their past life, said, look, I see what you're doing, it's a small business, but like my personal principles as a GP just say that I can't really understand promoting alcohol. Like, obviously the money is there to go towards the prevention. And I said, actually, we should have a chat about this because it's quite interesting, because that money that you think is going towards this is not. It's just going into your general bank account for that, the government uses for every sort of project in the country, not just alcohol prevention. And she was quite surprised by that, and she said, wow, I'm going to look into that. And she did. She got back to me, and she was very surprised, and she said, if something ever came up, for sure, I'll be in favor of if it was the right proposal, So stuff, it's even the MPs don't know, like
Yeah, so long as the money keeps coming in, they're not hardly going to question where it comes from.
Yeah.
And look, I don't think anybody's saying in this day and age that it shouldn't be taxed. I don't think there's anybody arguing for that, but I have had conversations with other distillers, and one in particular, and he said, I wouldn't even mind the bill as much if there was greater transparency around where the money was going, and if a greater dedicated portion of the excise bill was actually going towards that HPA levy.
Yeah, I'd love to see it going towards other stuff like that, if
there was just greater transparency, because even you're talking that that the HPA levy is a tiny amount. The distiller that I was talking to was saying, yeah, but where does that go?
Yeah.
What happens to that, and where is that going, and how is that being spent? Because trying to find that information, trying to find transparency around that, again, not easy thing to do.
Yeah, it is. It is hard to get a list of an itemized invoice, if you will, of where these sort of things go in government. So,
But there's a budget, right? It shouldn't be.
it shouldn't be, right? But
Yeah.
remember a few years ago there was the Regional Development Fund. Do you remember that? And
Yep.
remember when somebody came looking to say, "Hey, where did all these millions of dollars go?" And nobody could itemize anywhere. They said, "Oh, it went to projects, but we don't actually know which ones. The money just got sent." So someone's missing something up there, but. Yeah, it's a problem somebody has to look into, not just for excise, but in government spending. Things aren't getting written down and itemized, and if they are, they're being hidden for some reason, but they shouldn't be, of course.
Maybe, yeah. What would happen if the IRD came looking at Herrick Creek? Okay, well, where's this money going? Oh, it went to projects.
Yeah. I don't think I'd get away with that.
I don't think you'd get away with it either.
Look, we've been talking for a few minutes.
We have.
Let's have a drink. What do you want to start with? Whiskey or gin?
Oh, God. Well, tell me first why you've picked these particular ones.
So I picked two high ABV ones. These are two that would be text. There'd be a lot of text in the price tags for them. The Cardrona single malt cask, the Otago Pinot cask, 52%, and it's about $300-ish. The Third Island Navy gin, that's a newer one from them.
Oh.
It's just above $100, I believe, and at 57%, it's quite a lot of alcohol in it. So you don't find too many spirits above 57% in New Zealand. I don't think I could name more than one. Maybe the absinthe from Julian at number 8.
Clarity's got a what's their Navy strength? I think that's 56, 57.
Yeah, but I don't think there's many above 57 is what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. And I haven't actually had a good chance to try this one, so I'm kind of excited to
there we go.
give it a go. Thank you very much.
Which is, let's take a quick detour to say, okay, beyond the obvious of going from point A to point B, why would distillers look to release spirits at a higher ABV?
So as a distiller, the higher the ABV, sometimes you get, it depends on the spirit, but sometimes what you can do is get more flavors in there, and more, not more flavors, but maybe more concentrated flavors. Remember, distilling is that's what you're doing, right? You're taking a very big batch of something, and you're distilling the flavors out of that, right, down to a smaller amount of liquid. And usually when it comes off the still, it's going to be anywhere from 70 to 85%. That's obviously too hot to drink for anybody, and it's not safe either. But around that, it starts to be around that 60 down to 50. There's a lot of complex flavors that can hide in there. The oils are still really nicely mixed into it, and from there you can start adding water, as you're starting to do right now, and you can explore further down in the ABV from there. So it's not just taking 40%, and you can't really go anywhere with that. At 57%, well, I can add a little bit of water and try it at 55. I can try it again at 50. I can go down a little bit more, and suddenly you've got a little bit of a journey you can take with it. It mixes really well in cocktails as well at a higher ABV. You're going to keep those flavors really out. What's the right word? Yeah, they're going to shine more with a higher ABV, right? Navy strength. I'm sure you know the story.
I
right?
do.
Do you want to share it? Maybe most people don't.
Well, that's so a part of this. While we measure the strength of an alcohol in ABV, which is alcohol by volume, there are other places around the world that would measure it in proof. And so, yes, that whole idea was around. Well, there are a couple of different things. There are a couple of different things at play why it's so strong. So the first comes back down to proof. around gunpowder, where if you had your rum in particular, that you could wet the gunpowder with your rum and still manage to light your gunpowder.
Yeah.
So that's part of it also. But if we're going back to the heyday of the Royal Navy in particular, at a higher proof, at a higher strength, it actually acts as a preservative and as a disinfectant. So if you've got barrels of water that are starting to go a wee bit stagnant, you would add your rum, again, very, very strong, add that into the water, actually kills the bugs. And that's where we get grog.
Right.
So grog is very, very watered down kind of rum. It's that mixture of rum and water, but the reason they were doing that is because it would kill the bugs in the stagnant water and allow you to... I was just listening to a podcast about Admiral Nelson.
Oh, yes.
And after he was killed at the Battle of Trafalgar, they put his body into a barrel of brandy.
Oh.
Because that was the only way that they could stop it decomposing so that they could get him back to England and give him the state burial. So it wasn't just for, I think anybody else, if it had been anybody else, you get the burial at sea.
Yep.
You get the, and dumped into the ocean. Thank you for your service. But because it was Nelson, he had to get back. But if we are talking about other foods as well, that it was certainly, you would having your high proof rum or gin, then it was a natural preservative. So there was lots of kind of different reasons as to why it was so high that actually served a bit of a functional purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's sort of I've seen a couple different ABVs for it, whether it's 55 or is it 57% for being, Navy strength, officially Navy strength. But most people seem to think it's 57. So, but this one, this smells great. It's fresh, like
bit of citrus, bit of seaweed, bit of salt.
Yeah, I'm certainly getting like a floweriness. Like I'm standing in the rainforest, giving a big whiff of that nice, damp, fresh, wet air.
I've explored a lot of this country. I've explored a lot of both the North and South Island, driven around a whole lot. Really fortunate in that respect. I've not been to Stewart Island.
No, me neither. No. I've seen most of it too. Yeah. I'm missing Northland, Stewart Island, and I think the east coast of the North Island. Yeah. But Stewart Island would be great.
Yeah.
I guess we need to go see them sometime.
Add that to the list of road trips that we have to make.
On the bottom, it does say, it's our classic Third Island gin, locally forged. All right, Ty's passing me a note. Ty's our local bootlegger.
They still call it tapping the Admiral because they drank the cask of brandy at the end.
Oh.
And so opening up a cask of brandy, they call it tapping the Admiral.
Yeah, so in the British Navy, they still call it tapping the Admiral.
Okay.
Because they ended up drinking
Drinking Nelson's cask.
Yeah.
So that's what Ty's saying. They drank the cask after Nelson was
you
taken
can't
out.
let it go to waste.
I guess not. It's still good, I guess. Yeah.
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 All right.
The bottle for this one,
Yes.
it's our classic Third Island gin, locally forged Manuka, Rimu, and Horopito, showered in pure Stewart Island rainwater. Now of seafaring stature, it says. But I think that's
Yeah. I think I am getting that Horopito. Now I've added some water in there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, to see, as soon as I put water in it, I get less now. I have 57%. I thought that was really nice.
That Horopito comes through so strong in that sip. It is bright and peppery.
Yeah.
Nice bit of citrus as well. Vanilla. But coming back to our point about that strength, those oils just sit there on your tongue, and the finish is just much, much longer. There's a greater intensity of the flavors, which is great if you're sipping neat.
Yep.
But also, if you do then go and add your tonic, I mean, yeah, I don't like it when my gin and tonic tastes like tonic and I struggle to find the gin.
Yeah.
And one would argue that maybe if you have a stronger gin, then you don't need to add as much gin into your gin and tonic. You can have the same amount of tonic that you would have if, your gin was 37 to 40. You can actually add less of a higher strength and you can still get that flavor and still have that come through.
So typically, when you're buying one of these Navy Strength gins, they're going to be more expensive, obviously, because of what we're talking about. It's the excise tax on it. So the Third Island Classic gin is I think about $10 or $15 cheaper. That really does almost equate to the excise increase on it. So that's the reason why you look at a bottle and you say, "Whoa, that one's a bit more." It's just because you're getting more alcohol. It's actually better value, really. And like we say, yeah, you can mix less of it. I love that, though. It is lingering, and citrus, like you say.
A lot going on. That's actually quite complex.
Yeah. They have won a couple big awards. The Juniper's Best in Show, Small Batch New Zealand Gin Awards. They were the champion for that one. So well done. Well done, guys. That's really good.
Right, so we've set about trying to answer, where the taxes come from, why we've got this tax. I haven't really answered where it goes to, but that's something that we would actually like a bit more clarity on ourselves. Now perhaps we can go to what you alluded to earlier on when you started talking about a rebate, which is, what's the solution? Again, we've talked in previous episodes about, and again, I did, this is a very, very long arc, I did write to the Treasury Department to ask about, hey, when did the loans that were taken out, and then Treasury said, we don't keep records on that kind of thing. And I said, you're the Treasury, of course you should keep records on that thing. And they referred me to the New Zealand archives, and when I started poking around in there, again they were like, "Oh, I don't think we keep records on this kind of stuff either." So basically, I just got a big kind of walk around of saying, "Okay, well, if you want to, we've got these diaries and things which have been digitized, but you can't actually use any kind of search function in there." I'm like, I actually don't want the archival stuff because I think, if my hunch is right, I actually think that, these loans were being paid off in the 1960s, 1970s, so they shouldn't be as old as what... Yeah, so the short answer is, don't quite know when the loans for the railroads, when we paid that off for Britain, which is then when we start to see the resurgence of distilling back in New Zealand. Don't know when that happened. But it was the removal of those protectionisms, come all the way around. It means that when you said before, when you're looking at, and I mean, we've used Jack Daniels, but if you're to throw a Glenlivet 12 or a Glenmorangie now 12 or 10, and you're trying to compare that with a New Zealand whiskey, and you're being very, very price conscious, well, of course those ones do come in cheaper there. We are not, when I say we, New Zealand is not competing on a level playing field. No. This was a very, very long way of asking, Tom, how do we level that playing field, and how do we, I don't know, introduce some measure of protectionism without, and this is very topical, going down a tariff trade war route?
There's the, the easy, there's no easy way. There's the sensible way, maybe, or there's the maybe I think the better way, but the sensible way I think that maybe most distillers have agreed on is that we need a system similar to Australia, with the rebates. And I think the fact that Australia has rebates set up already, it's an easy system for New Zealand to just copy. They can just pick it up and say, great, we know how they run it, we'll just copy and paste in New Zealand. Here's the rules, bing, bang, boom, done.
Well, how does it work over there?
So yeah, if you're a small it doesn't. If you're a distiller, there's no definition for small. If you're just a distiller in Australia, and you put it through a still, anything you put through a still, you're eligible for the rebate up to $400,000 a year. So the way I've understood it is it's not actually a rebate where you pay it and they send it back. They actually just don't make you pay it right away.
Okay.
And so that first $400,000 is you don't have to pay it. That's it. So
You don't have to pay the tax on it.
the excise.
Okay,
Yeah.
the excise.
So it's a huge win for them, right? And they've kind of downplayed it to the public, of course, because the prices didn't change much, of course. But the distilling industry has exploded with that help. Like the distilling industry over there is massive. There's nearly 100 whiskey distilleries in Tasmania alone.
Oh, that boggles my mind.
Yeah, I think there's something like 2,000 distilleries in all of Australia. There's a lot of stuff going on over there, and it's all really because that tax rebate is available to them. So that's huge, right? But you can't be an importer and use that rebate because it hasn't been distilled in Australia in any way.
So it means that for a much smaller craft boutique kind of distillery can still be a champion to their local community, but then when you are competing against the likes of a Glenlivet or a Jack Daniel's, which absolutely have got economies of scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you are producing as much liquid as what they do, you can bring the price down because you are running at economies of scale.
Yeah.
But I guess what they're trying to do is that's one way of leveling that playing field, is trying to Australia does have insanely high taxes on alcohol in general.
Yeah.
I remember last time I was there, just going in to buy beer and looking at the price of a six-pack going, what on earth?
Yeah, and I think it's been good for them to be able to hire staff and pay themselves. I mean, most distilleries in New Zealand as well, they don't pay themselves. There's no, they're self-employed in quotations, but no one's getting paid. It's really just a lot of people making a fun go of it and hoping for future success, sort of thing.
Sure.
These sort of things would enable lifestyles, people to quit their other jobs and run their distilleries, grow their distilleries, hire more people, and really make more influence, make more of a difference in their community with what they're doing. Now, let's just pour a whiskey first. Why don't we? And then I'm going to give you my more controversial solution to it.
Oh, that's ominous. Seeing as we're pouring Cardrona, this excise, so that's still a tax you pay here, even when we know that Cardrona is very much looking to compete in the overseas market, and they've got foreign investment so that they can better export and champion New Zealand on the world stage. The New Zealand government's very, very keen to talk about the New Zealand wine industry, and around the world, New Zealand really is known for producing some exceptional wine. Yeah, I wonder why spirits have such a different reputation, but also they're still paying this excise tax in New Zealand, even though the product itself is going to be sold overseas.
So no. So this is the game, right?
Okay.
It's actually better for us to export because we don't pay the excise tax here. If it goes from your duty-free warehouse or your customs-controlled area where you produced it to the border and offshore, then you don't pay it. It's going to be the importer in the other country who's going to pay that country's
Okay, gotcha.
excise tax at that point, right? So, yeah, you take a bottle of Cardrona, you send it to America, you're going to pay the cheaper excise tax of America upon import over there. So it's to our benefit, really, to export it and not sell it here, I guess. But we're also very far away from it.
We're far away from everywhere, but that's part of it.
And it doesn't help us to go to Australia because we're still going to have to pay. We didn't make it in Australia. We're going to have to pay that $100 per liter in Australia. You know, so the only places we really can ship them to would be Asia, North America, and Europe's a really tough pickle right now for sure. Still with the EU. So, yeah, North America and Asia are the big markets. Probably Asia being the easiest for New Zealand distillers to target, and the biggest. It's huge. It's a huge market. But it's also a difficult one. It's a risky one. So, yeah, that's an interesting side effect of excise.
Actually, it's better to... And this... I mean, yes, it was a while ago since I've done my OE, but that frustrated me no end going into an Asda in London and looking at the prices of New Zealand apples, New Zealand lamb, New Zealand beef, and standing there with my phone and calculating the exchange rate and going, hang on, how, even with the exchange rate, how are all of these New Zealand products cheaper here than what they are at home?
Yeah.
And they had to fly halfway around the world to get here. This makes absolutely no sense.
It's crazy, yeah.
It is crazy.
I've seen, New Zealand lamb back in Canada that was cheaper, and it would have taken ages to get there. I mean, but
this is fruity.
Yeah, this is the Cardrona Otago Pinot cask. It's a single cask, part of their lineup now. So they're just taking single casks of ex Pinot Noir, and really nice. 52% dried red fruit.
Got some of those tannins in there.
Yeah, bit of that. But like, there's that bright. I don't even actually know how to say it, but kind of a bright biscuit note to it. You know, like the grain does come through for me. And the new lineup, of Cardrona spirits is quite interesting nowadays. Hand bottled. Oh, this was filled in 2018 and bottled in 2024. So that's an 8. Is it? No, 6-year-old math. So this would probably still be the Scottish barley that they were using back in the day. But they are using Kiwi malt now, if anybody is wondering, while we're talking about them. But they've got the American barrel, the Pinot barrel, the Sherry barrel, as well as the Falcon, which is like I don't want to say a blend, but it's a distillery blend of a few different barrels, types of barrels. And each one's sort of just targeted a different drinker, you know. I like the American cask. That's my go-to.
Yes, it's bright, sweet, punchy.
I've got one of those at home.
But I know lots of people overseas that say they don't like whiskey finished in wine casks. And I wonder, hypothesizing here, whether it's because maybe their wine industry isn't as good, because I really like a lot of the New Zealand wine cask finishes. Maybe it's because New Zealand wine really is just...
You're not the only one,
that much better.
Somebody did say that at Dramfest too, like the New Zealand red wine finishes just are different, And I do think you're right. It's probably something to do with our terroir and our grapes and what our producers in the wine industry are doing. So kudos to them, really. I don't think it's anything on the distillers in that case, because we're just using the leftover stuff, you know. And you got to pick a good barrel, of course.
That's exactly it. You've got to
Um,
pick a good barrel.
Yeah. Well, ties back, everyone.
No, you are right. Plus, they use a lot of indigenous fermentation in international wines.
Okay.
So you'll get that mustiness still left in the barrel coming through.
Okay. So
Cool.
so Ty says they use a lot of wild indigenous yeasts in the international wines, and so that gives it a more musty flavor overseas. So, and Ty's a winemaker. I should point that out. So there you go. All right. My solution.
Your controversial take.
I think if we were going to do this right and really give New Zealand what it needs to become the spirits dominating, producing country that it could be, we need to double the excise on imported spirits. I think if you bring it, and that's controversial for sure.
Yeah.
But listen to this. If I can go to the super liquor today and buy a 1.25 liter of Jim Beam for $32, there's a problem. Like, that's a lot of alcohol for a real cheap price. And I don't think it's the whiskey nerd who's casually drinking that's going to buy that, right? Also, the selection of imported spirits we have in New Zealand is quite limited already, right? If we're looking at American spirits, it is limited to very few brands.
Yes.
Scotch is a different story. We do have a lot of Scottish distilleries. We're very lucky, but I don't know, maybe given the local landscape, maybe it's a double on American spirits specifically, you know, and we leave Scotch alone. But
how do you paint that brush?
well, it is a tough one, you know. Like it's up to customs to sort of police that sort of stuff, right? It would be a different category basically when they're filling out their records or something like that. And it would also take a legislative change to do something like that. So
why? So would your preference then be for a rebate for local distillers or for a doubling of the excise on imported spirits?
I'd like to see a doubling of imported spirits and a halving of local spirits and excise.
And ditch the rebate.
Ditch the rebate. Yeah. 2 tax rates, imported versus locally manufactured. Because now you start up your distillery, the barrier to entry is much lower. You're still giving money to the government via these taxes, albeit less. However, it's going to be made up from the imported spirits, which are still going to be imported. Let's just be honest. They're still going to come in.
Yeah.
Your $32 of Jim Beam is going to go up to $40 or $50, you know, sort of thing maybe. But that suddenly levels it out a bit more for the local guy who's trying to make a whiskey at $100, you know, and it might make it a bit better for us to be able to start that rolling of producing quality spirits and getting people involved in it. What do you reckon?
I mean, there's what I...
Now, you see, you're a consumer of international spirits.
I am.
Yeah.
Unashamedly, I am. And when I started doing whiskey tastings about 5 years ago, it was a really big deal for me. I mean, the first New Zealand whiskey event that I did, it was just such a big deal that there were 5 whiskies that I could pour. And I think even at that one, it was still only 4 distilleries because I think I had 2 from Thompson. But it was just the fact that I had 5 different New Zealand whiskies that weren't $200+ a bottle that I could actually do the math, work the budget, make it fit. And it was such a big deal. And then now it would be fairly common for me to have at least one New Zealand whiskey at each event that I do, and that's just because there is so much more of it. There are so many more distilleries, and I mean, I will still love Scotch, and I will still keep drinking Scotch because people who have been to my events know that. I wear my tartan, I have my kilt on, partly because that's the uniform, they know who to show their ticket to, but also, I just love it, and there is that part of, putting the uniform on, going to work, having a great time. But what I do, or am doing increasingly more, is that when I am showcasing a New Zealand distillery, and I've got a wee, I'll make a video, and it's just, images on a slide that repeat around. And so when I'm pouring Thompson, I say, this is Matt. He's the distiller. And there's a nice photo of him standing in front of his stills. And I poured 1919, and I said, here's Soren. Here's a picture of him standing in front of his stills. This is Mark and Roe, and they make Waiheke whiskey. I know them by name, they know me by face. Quite often I'll reach out to them directly and say, hey, I've got an event coming up, I would love to pour this, can I buy a bottle off of you please? These are connections that I will never really have with the Scotch distillery. I think I could probably count on one hand the number of times a Scotch distillery has even liked a post when I've put up a video or a review or anything else, like an engagement with Scotch distilleries. Yeah, I could probably, in the 5 years, I could count the number of engagements on one hand.
Yeah.
However, I receive regular feedback, updates, everything else, messages from local people. So, yeah, a very, very long-winded way of saying, like, I would probably wear the added cost of Scotch, and because ultimately I do want to support people here, and while I like the Scotch whisky industry, I admire it from afar living in New Zealand. This is my backyard, and I want to support the people and the livelihoods and the communities that are here.
And that's where it comes from. It's about drink local, support local, because if you're buying your bottle of overseas whiskey, most of those profits are going overseas, right? So if they can contribute more to our general government coffers through a doubling of excise tax, at least a little bit more comes to us that way, and it gives still that little bit of a lower entry for our local guys to be able to push into the industry and compete with those Scotch whiskey, the American guys, on an international scale, and keeping the money local in New Zealand.
Now, don't even get me started about the amount of tax that the Scotch whisky distilleries are paying for it to go down to Westminster and then have a pittance of what they pay going actually back up to Scotland. Don't even, that's a whole different conversation.
That's someone else's podcast.
And that's somebody else's podcast. But I just wanted that on the record. Thank you.
So that's where I would hang my hat, but I would settle absolutely for the Australian system for a rebate. I'd absolutely be able to hire staff and grow our distillery as well, and I'd love to see what other people could do with that rebate in place as well. Yeah.
Tax. We're going to keep coming back to tax.
It's unfortunately something it's something that people have asked us to elaborate on and give our ideas on.
And hey, at least it's not tariffs, right?
What would your solution be? Do you have a solution?
I mean, yeah, you far more, educated on this than me. I mean, certainly the idea of a rebate, I mean, does a rebate encourage people to stick within the lines, and I'm going to cap my production at X amount, and I don't, because I know that if I stick below this line, this is a ballpark that I'm very comfortable playing in, and there's no real incentive for me to push past that where I start paying that tax, versus, I think that was just some initial impressions there, but I mean, yeah, a rebate. I like the idea of a rebate because it doesn't hurt me when I then go into whiskey galore looking to buy, Scotch whiskey or from somewhere else. But is that going to be enough of a change or enough of an incentive for people to actually be a bit more thoughtful and considerate and say, okay, actually, with my purchasing power, I am going to buy local.
At the very least, it would give the distilleries the power to put that money into more direct local investments instead of giving it to the government to spread out the way they sort of see fit. You know what I mean? So if I have that $400,000 in my accounts to hire my staff, that's going to stay in my local community and support my local team.
I mean, that was Sandymount, and that he actually pays his own version of an HPA levy where he does put money directly back into the community and into public health initiatives because he sees that as part of his responsibility. So that's over and above everything that he's already paying.
Yeah.
That's money he's putting back into his community because he cares.
Yeah.
And, he doesn't have to do that.
No.
But if there was some kind of tax relief, I can only imagine, putting words in his mouth, that this is more money that he would then have for his replanting efforts and all of the trees that he's planting on the Otago Peninsula, or for different public health initiatives, or to expand his solar panels and his solar farm that he has powering his distillery there.
Yeah. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
So that's about it.
Yeah. Do you have any? I mean, nobody likes paying tax, but it is just one of those parts of, if
Parts of life.
Yeah, indeed it is. But if you've got any thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. If there is another specific topic, this hasn't been the most fun topic to cover, but it is certainly one that affects everybody, whether you are a producer or a retailer or a consumer, that hits all of us in that pocket.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we want to know what you guys think. If you guys have more solutions we haven't talked about, or if you know of other interesting solutions around the world that people have implemented, anything like that, get in touch with us, distilnationnz@gmail.com, or distilnationnz on all socials, or distilnation.nz is our website. And you can always contact Cameron at Discovering Drams, or myself at Herrick Creek, or at Herrick Creek Tom on TikTok. And there's always lots of ways to get in touch with us, eh? Yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to. So thank you for listening, everyone. It's been fun. I actually kind of enjoy this sort of chat. I like hypothesizing policy changes, but we'll see what comes.
We'll see what comes.
Cheers.
Cheers.